The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Montana Territory, 1875, but Hunter Blackwood didn't flinch. The lone wolf of Whisper Creek had seen enough death to last 3 lifetimes, and the sound of violence no longer stirred his soul. Standing on the porch of his isolated ranch house, he watched as another tumbleweed rolled lazily across his property. Much like the years had rolled by empty and purposeless since he'd lost everything that mattered. "You're a fool, Blackwood," Sheriff Donovan had told him just yesterday in town. "Building that big house for ghosts. Everyone knows your bed will always be cold." Hunter had merely tipped his hat and continued loading supplies onto his wagon. The townsfolk had been saying the same thing for 5 years, ever since the Comanche raid that had taken his wife and infant son. He'd rebuilt his ranch bigger than before, constructed a house meant for a family, and slept alone in it every night, haunted by memories and the echo of laughter that would never fill those rooms. Mr. Blackwood. The sound of hooves pounding across hard, packed earth drew Hunter's attention to the horizon. A single rider was approaching fast, too fast for safety. Even from this distance, he could see it was Tanner White, the young hand who worked at the general store in town. "Whoa there, boy," Hunter called as Tanner nearly fell from his horse in his rush to dismount. "What's got you riding like the devil himself is on your tail? It's the stagecoach from Denver," Tanner panted, his face flushed with exertion. "Robbers hit it at Serpent's Pass. Sheriff's gathering men to go after them." Hunter's jaw tightened. "Any casualties?" The driver took a bullet to the shoulder. "One passenger dead, some businessman from back east. But there's a woman, sir. She's alive but hurt bad. Doc Patterson says she needs proper care, and the boarding house is full with that mining convention." "What's that got to do with me?" Hunter asked, though he already knew the answer. His ranch was the closest property to town with space to spare a house built for a family that never came to be. "Sheriff thought with all your empty rooms." Tanner trailed off, suddenly looking unsure. Hunter sighed, feeling the weight of obligation settling on his shoulders. "Tell the sheriff I'll ready a room, but once she's healed enough to travel, she goes. I'm not running a hotel." Tanner's relief was palpable. "Yes, sir, thank you, sir. They'll be bringing her out within the hour." As the young man galloped back toward town, Hunter stood motionless, staring at the horizon. 5 years of solitude was about to be interrupted, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent when the wagon appeared, moving slowly across the prairie toward his ranch. Hunter had spent the intervening time preparing the guest bedroom, airing it out and putting fresh linens on a bed that had never been slept in. He'd built this house with hope for more children, for a future that disappeared in a single night of flames and blood. He walked out to meet the wagon as it pulled up to his house. Sheriff Donovan was driving, with Doc Patterson seated beside him. In the back, a woman lay still on a makeshift stretcher, her face partially obscured by a blanket. "Blackwood," the sheriff acknowledged with a nod. "Appreciate you doing this." "How bad is she?" Hunter asked, ignoring the greeting as he moved to the back of the wagon. "Concussion, broken ribs, and a nasty gash on her leg," Doc Patterson replied, climbing down from the wagon seat. "Nothing fatal, but she needs rest and care. The bump on her head has her drifting in and out of consciousness." Hunter nodded, then reached into the wagon to help move the stretcher. As they shifted her, the blanket fell away from her face, and Hunter felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years, a jolt of recognition, followed by confusion. The woman was breathtakingly beautiful despite her injuries, high cheekbones, full lips now pale with pain, and a cascade of auburn hair. But it was more than beauty that struck him. There was something hauntingly familiar about her face, though he was certain he'd never met her before. "Her name's Willow Crawford," the sheriff informed him as they carefully carried her into the house. "Widow, according to her papers, was heading to Helena to stay with family." Widow, the word hung in the air like gunsmoke. Hunter knew too well what that word meant, the hollowness it carved inside you, the way it defined your existence thereafter. They settled Willow in the guest bedroom, and Doc Patterson gave Hunter detailed instructions on her care: when to change bandages, what signs of fever to watch for, how to help her take the laudanum for pain. "I'll ride out tomorrow to check on her," the doctor promised as he packed up his bag. "Sooner if there's trouble." After the men left, Hunter stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching the shallow rise and fall of Willow Crawford's chest. Her face was peaceful in unconsciousness, but the bruise blooming on her temple told of the violence she'd endured. "Looks like it's just you and me, Mrs. Crawford," he said softly, though she couldn't hear him. "Don't get too comfortable, this isn't home." Night fell, and Hunter found himself checking on his patient more frequently than necessary. Each time he told himself it was simply duty, the obligation of a host. But there was something more, a curiosity about this woman who had so unexpectedly entered his life. Near midnight, as he sat beside her bed changing the cool cloth on her forehead, her eyes fluttered open. They were green, a deep forest green that seemed to hold secrets. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse but clear. "My ranch. 5 miles outside of Whisper Creek," Hunter replied, setting the cloth aside. "The stagecoach you were on was robbed. You were injured." She tried to sit up but winced, her hand going to her ribs. "The others. There was a man from Boston seated across from me." Hunter hesitated. "He didn't make it, madam. I'm sorry." Willow closed her eyes, pain crossing her features that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. "His name was Edward Pearson. He spent the entire journey telling me about his wife and children waiting for him in Helena." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the bedside table. Hunter found himself unsure what to say, the social skills he'd once possessed having atrophied from disuse. "I'm Hunter Blackwood," he finally offered. "This is my ranch you're recovering at." Her eyes opened again, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Blackwood. I won't impose on you any longer than necessary. The doctor says you'll need at least 2 weeks of rest before you can travel again," Hunter informed her, standing up. "Are you hungry? I can bring you some broth." Willow shook her head slightly. "Just tired, and my head. It feels like there's a blacksmith working inside it." Hunter retrieved the small brown bottle from the bedside table. "Doc Patterson left this laudanum for the pain. A few drops should help you sleep." After administering the medicine, he watched as her eyelids grew heavy. Just before she drifted off, she murmured, "Your house feels empty, Mr. Blackwood, like it's waiting for something." The observation, so accurate and unexpected, left him speechless. By the time he formulated a response, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Hunter retreated to the kitchen, where he poured himself a generous measure of whiskey. Willow Crawford was observant, even in her injured state. Too observant for comfort. The next day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring morning that made the Montana landscape look like a painting. Hunter had slept poorly, his dreams filled with images of the past mixed with the face of his unexpected guest. He was frying bacon when he heard a soft noise behind him. Turning, he found Willow standing in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. She'd somehow managed to change into a simple blue dress that must have been in the carpet bag the sheriff had brought with her belongings. "You shouldn't be up," Hunter said, quickly wiping his hands and moving to her side. "Your ribs need time to heal." "I've never been good at lying still," she replied, her voice stronger than the night before. "And I smelled coffee." Despite himself, Hunter smiled slightly. Stubborn woman. "At least sit down before you fall down." He helped her to the kitchen table, noticing the way she bit her lip to keep from crying out in pain. Once seated, some color returned to her pale cheeks. "How long have you lived here, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked as he poured her a cup of coffee. Hunter hesitated before answering. "Built this house 5 years ago, had a smaller place before that, but it burned down." Something in his tone must have revealed more than his words because Willow's eyes softened with understanding. "You lost someone." It wasn't a question, and Hunter didn't treat it as one. He simply nodded once, then turned back to the stove to flip the bacon before it burned. "My husband died 2 years ago," Willow offered quietly. "Influenza." It took him in 3 days so quickly I barely had time to understand what was happening. Hunter placed a plate of bacon and eggs in front of her. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Crawford." "Willow, please," she said, offering a small smile that transformed her face. "If I'm to impose on your hospitality for 2 weeks, we should dispense with formalities." For the first time in years, Hunter felt a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Hunter, then. They ate in companionable silence, the spring sunlight streaming through the windows and casting the kitchen in a warm glow that seemed at odds with the emptiness that had pervaded the house for so long. "Your home is beautiful," Willow commented as she finished her meal. "You built it yourself." Hunter nodded. "Every board and nail had help with the raising, but the design was mine." "It's a family home," she observed, those perceptive green eyes scanning the spacious kitchen, the large dining table that could seat 8, the wide hallway leading to multiple bedrooms. "Yet you live here alone." The observation stung despite its truth. "My wife was pregnant when we lost our first home. I built this one for the family we planned to have." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than he'd intended. Hunter hadn't spoken of Sarah and their unborn child in years, had locked those memories away where they couldn't hurt him daily. Willow reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching his. "Thank you for telling me that. I know how hard it is to speak of them." Before Hunter could respond, the sound of an approaching horse drew his attention. "That'll be Doc Patterson coming to check on you," he said, rising from the table. "I've got chores to tend to. Make yourself at home." He escaped to the barn, busying himself with tasks that didn't need doing, simply to avoid the uncomfortable feelings that Willow Crawford's presence had stirred within him. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Hunter would rise early to tend to his ranch duties, leaving breakfast for Willow before heading out. She recovered her strength quickly, and by the 4th day, he returned to the house at midday to find her in the kitchen, an apron tied over her dress, stirring something that smelled heavenly. "What are you doing?" he asked, removing his hat as he entered. Willow turned, a spot of flour on her cheek. "Making stew and bread. I hope you don't mind, but I found your mother's recipe box in the pantry." Hunter stared at her, momentarily speechless. The recipe box had been one of the few things salvaged from the fire, and he'd placed it in the pantry when he built the new house, unable to look at it but unwilling to part with it. "How did you know it was my mother's?" he finally asked. Willow smiled softly. "The handwriting changes. The older recipes are in one-hand elegant practiced. I guess that was your mother's. The newer ones are different, your wife's, I think." Hunter swallowed hard. She was right, of course. Sarah had added her own recipes to his mother's collection, planning for a lifetime of family meals that never came to be. "You don't have to cook," he said gruffly. "I want to," Willow replied simply. "Keeping busy helps me heal. And cooking for one person is lonely. I've discovered that these past 2 years." Something shifted between them that afternoon as they shared a meal made from his mother's and wife's recipes. Hunter found himself telling Willow about his cattle operation, his plans for expanding the herd, the challenges of ranching in Montana territory. She listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that revealed her own knowledge of running a business. She and her husband had owned a successful dry goods store in Denver before his death. As the sun began to set, painting the kitchen in amber light, Hunter realized he'd talked more in one afternoon than he had in the past 5 years combined. "You're easy to talk to," he admitted, surprising himself with the confession. Willow's smile was tinged with sadness. "Grief makes good listeners of us all, I think. We understand the value of words when we've lost the ones we most wanted to hear." That night, Hunter lay awake, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of Willow sleeping just down the hall. Her presence had changed something in the house. It no longer echoed with emptiness, but seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. The next morning, Doc Patterson pronounced Willow's recovery remarkable and reduced her mandated rest period to just 1 more week. The ribs are healing nicely, and that cut on your leg shows no sign of infection, the doctor told her as Hunter hovered in the doorway of the sitting room. You're a strong woman, Mrs. Crawford. Thank you, doctor, Willow replied with a smile that lit her entire face. I've had excellent care. After the doctor left, Hunter found himself reluctant to return to his chores. Instead, he offered, "It's a fine day. Would you like to sit on the porch for a while, get some fresh air?" Willow's delight at the suggestion made something warm unfurl in Hunter's chest. He helped her to the porch swing, careful of her still tender ribs, and found himself sitting beside her rather than returning to work. "Tell me about her," Willow said softly after they had swung in silence for several minutes. "Your wife." Hunter stiffened, his first instinct to shut down the conversation, but something in Willow's gentle expression made him reconsider. "Her name was Sarah," he said, the name feeling strange on his tongue after years of avoiding it. "She was sunshine. Always laughing, always seeing the best in everything. Even out here, miles from town, dealing with drought and harsh winters, she found joy." Once he started, the words flowed more easily. He told Willow about meeting Sarah at a church social in Missouri, about convincing her to come west with him, about building their first small cabin with their own hands. "The night of the raid, I was in town picking up supplies," Hunter continued, his voice growing rougher. "The Comanche had lost hunting grounds to settlers further south and were desperate. Our ranch was isolated, an easy target, by the time I got back. He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to." Willow's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own in silent understanding. "Daniel, my husband, and I were trying for a baby when he got sick," she offered, her own voice thick with emotion. "That's the cruelest part sometimes, not just losing what you had, but losing what might have been." They sat there as the sun traveled across the sky, two broken people sharing the weight of their losses, making it somehow lighter in the sharing. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt dangerously close to contentment. Willow's strength returned more each day, and she insisted on contributing to the household cooking meals, mending Hunter's shirts that had gone neglected, even helping him with the ledgers for the ranch one rainy afternoon. "Your cattle operation could be twice as profitable if you added sheep," she commented, studying his financial records with a business owner's eye. "The wool market is growing, and this land could support both." Hunter raised an eyebrow. "A rancher raising sheep. That's a good way to get run out of the territory." Willow laughed, the sound like music in the previously silent house. "Times are changing, Hunter. The smart ranchers are diversifying." He found himself considering it not just because it made business sense, but because it was Willow's idea. And that realization troubled him deeply. On Sunday, exactly 1 week after Willow's arrival, Hunter suggested they attend church in town. "Might do you good to see something besides these four walls and my ugly face," he said over breakfast. Willow looked up from her coffee with surprise. "Do you attend regularly?" Hunter shook his head. "Haven't been in 5 years, but I thought, well, you might want to." Her expression softened. "I would like that. And your face isn't ugly, Hunter Blackwood, far from it." The simple compliment flustered him more than he cared to admit. As he hitched the horses to his buggy later that morning, he found himself taking extra care with his appearance, trimming his beard, wearing his good suit that had hung untouched in the wardrobe for years. The arrival of Hunter Blackwood at the Whisper Creek Church caused a stir among the congregation. Whispers followed them as he helped Willow to a pew, his hand at the small of her back. Sheriff Donovan nodded approvingly from across the aisle, while other townsfolk stared openly at the transformation in the reclusive rancher. "Everyone is staring," Willow whispered as they sat down. "Not at you," Hunter replied. "I'm something of a local mystery, the hermit of Blackwood Ranch." Willow's lips twitched with amusement. "Well, you've certainly shattered their expectations today." After the service, they were approached by several curious townsfolk, all eager to meet the woman staying at Blackwood Ranch. Hunter watched with admiration as Willow charmed them effortlessly, her natural warmth drawing people to her just as it had drawn him out of his shell. "You're good with people," he commented as they drove home later, the spring sunshine warm on their faces. Willow smiled. "I ran a store for years." "You learn to read people to find connections. Is that what you're doing with me?" Hunter asked, the question slipping out before he could reconsider it. "Finding connections?" Willow turned to study his profile. "No," she said softly. "With you, I don't have to try." "The connection was already there from the first moment I opened my eyes in your home." The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Hunter kept his eyes on the road ahead, but he was acutely aware of Willow beside him, of the truth in her words that echoed his own experience. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of orange and purple, Hunter realized with stark clarity that he was falling in love with Willow Crawford. The knowledge terrified him, both the vulnerability it created and the inevitability of more pain when she left, as she must, in just a few days. "A penny for your thoughts," Willow said, breaking the silence. Hunter chose his words carefully. "I was thinking that this house hasn't felt like a home in a very long time, not until recently." Willow's breath caught audibly. "Hunter, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I'm not expecting anything. I know you'll be leaving for Helena soon to join your family." Willow was quiet for so long that Hunter thought he'd offended her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "There is no family in Helena," she admitted. "That was a lie I told the stagecoach company. I'm running away." Hunter turned to look at her, confusion evident on his face. Running from what? In the fading light, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "After Daniel died, his brother took over the store. He's been pressuring me to marry him. Says it's the sensible thing, keeping the business in the family. When his pressuring turned to threats, I sold my house and fled. I had no destination in mind beyond a way." Anger flared in Hunter's chest at the thought of anyone threatening this woman. "You're safe here," he said with fierce conviction. "No one will harm you at Blackwood Ranch." A tear slipped down Willow's cheek. "That's just it, Hunter. I've never felt safer than I have these past days, but I can't stay. I won't be another burden for you to bear." "Burden?" Hunter repeated incredulously. "Willow, you've brought life back to this house, to me. Before you came, I was just existing. Now I'm—" He struggled to find the words. "Now I'm living again." In the growing darkness, he reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, warm and sure. "I've been afraid," she confessed. "Afraid of what I'm feeling for you. It seems impossible, too soon, too intense." "I know," Hunter agreed. "It doesn't make logical sense. But I stopped believing in logic the night I lost everything and somehow kept breathing." Willow's free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "What are you saying, Hunter?" He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to leap into the unknown. "I'm saying stay. Not as a guest, not temporarily. Stay with me, Willow. Let's see what this is between us." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and fear in equal measure. Then Willow leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally parted, both breathless, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" Willow laughed softly. "I think we're both crazy, but yes." 2 days later, Doc Patterson made his final visit to check on Willow's recovery. He found her in the garden behind the house, planting vegetables in neat rows while Hunter repaired a section of fence nearby, the two of them working in companionable tandem. "Well now," the doctor said with a knowing smile, "I see my patient has made a full recovery." Willow straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "Thanks to your care, doctor, and Hunter's." The doctor's examination was brief, confirming what they already knew: Willow was healed enough to travel. The question of whether she would was answered when Hunter joined them, standing closer to Willow than mere hospitality would dictate. "Mrs. Crawford has decided to stay on in Whisper Creek," Hunter informed the doctor, his eyes never leaving Willow's face. She's thinking of opening a shop in town. Apparently, we're in desperate need of proper dry goods. And proper management, Willow added with a smile. No offense to Mr. Jenkins, but his store organization leaves much to be desired. Doc Patterson looked between them, taking in their matching expressions of cautious happiness. I see, he said simply. Well, that's good news for Whisper Creek, and perhaps for other things as well. As the doctor rode away, Hunter turned to Willow. Are you sure about this, staying here, starting over? Willow reached up to touch his face, a gesture that had already become familiar between them. I've never been more certain of anything. This feels right, Hunter, like it was meant to be. That evening, as they sat at the dining table no longer at opposite ends, but side by side, Hunter took Willow's hand in his. People will talk, he warned her. They'll say we're rushing, that it's too soon after our losses. Willow squeezed his hand. Let them talk, we know what we've found here. Something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. 3 months later, on a perfect summer day, Hunter Blackwood and Willow Crawford were married in the same church where they had first appeared together. The townsfolk of Whisper Creek turned out in full force, drawn as much by curiosity as by goodwill. Never thought I'd see the day, Sheriff Donovan commented during the reception held at Blackwood Ranch. Everyone said his bed would always be cold, but I reckon we were wrong about that. Willow, overhearing the remark as she passed with a tray of cake, smiled at the sheriff. Some men just need the right woman to warm their hearts, Sheriff. Hunter had a lot of love left to give. It just needed somewhere to go. That night, as Hunter and Willow stood on the porch of their home, truly their home now, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky, Hunter marveled at how completely his life had transformed in such a short time. What are you thinking? Willow asked, leaning into his embrace. That I never thought I'd be happy again, he answered honestly. That I believed this house would always echo with what might have been instead of being filled with what is. Willow turned in his arms to face him. We carry them with us, you know, Sarah and Daniel. They're part of who we are, part of what brought us together. Hunter nodded, understanding the truth of her words. They taught us how to love, and now we get to use that lesson again, differently but just as deeply. As they stood there, the house behind them glowed with warmth and light, no longer a monument to loss, but a home being filled with new memories, new love, and the promise of a future neither had dared to imagine just months before. 1 year later, the sound of a baby's cry echoed through the rooms of Blackwood Ranch. Hunter paced outside the bedroom door while Doc Patterson attended to Willow inside, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. When the door finally opened, the doctor's face split into a wide grin. Congratulations, Blackwood, you have a healthy daughter. Hunter rushed into the room to find Willow propped up against the pillows, tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. As he approached the bed, she turned the baby slightly so he could see the perfect little face. Meet your daughter, Willow said softly. I thought we might call her Hope. Tears filled Hunter's eyes as he sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch the downy head of his child. Hope, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. It's perfect. As night fell over Blackwood Ranch, the house that had once stood empty and cold was now the warmest place in all of Montana territory, filled with love, with family, and with the kind of hope that only comes after walking through the darkest valleys and finding light on the other side.